If you can't get enough of a middle-aged man talking teenage romance, then today's video just might be for you. Today, we are reviewing Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything, where I, your host, Spencer Duncan, dive into every kind of book out there, and sometimes, well, we'll see. This is the first time I drag my friends along for the ride. And today I'm thrilled to announce a new series on the channel that's been cooking for a little bit. It's going to be called Bromantasy. And that's right, it'll be me and a very good friend of mine. We go way back to high school. We've long since discussed books. I think one of the first things that we had in common was our interest, particularly in Harry Potter, but we've definitely had a lot of interest over the years that have been related to books in many different ways. And I'm sure the world just would love to have another video of two middle-aged white dudes, diving headfirst into the wonderful world of books. And to make it interesting, we are, of course, going to take on some of the most popular books that are out there right now, even though we are not the target demographic. But that's okay, because the premise of this channel is that I read everything, and so I'm bringing my friend Trevor along as I make him read everything too. Trevor, would you like to introduce yourself to all of the viewers out there?
Yeah, like you said, we go way back, and I'm just really excited to be on for this series. Like you said, we often have these conversations anyway, so figured may as well record it and get other people involved in the conversation, which I think is the fun part about doing this. But I'm especially excited about doing this series because this is a series that my wife loves quite a bit. In fact, she had even told me that she did not want me reading it because she was afraid that my criticisms would ruin it, that she would just get annoyed. And so she wasn't going to allow me. I was going to actually read it secretly, but she does know, and she endorses this. So really trying to come in this with an open mind, and I had a ton of fun doing it as preparing for this video, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Okay. I actually also have a close family friend, a sister-in-law, who she will usually tolerate my discussion of other romantasy books and series. And when I mentioned that I was doing this one, she similarly had a reaction of, I don't think I want you reviewing that. It seems to had a very visceral and somewhat impactful influence on her over the last several decades. I think she was relatively young when she first read it. With that, let's actually discuss a few of the ground rules that are going to be necessary as we take on these series. Now, I would like to think that I personally am quite fair to all the different books that I read, even though I'm not always the target audience. I try to keep that in mind and keep that forefront as I make some kind of approach to what I thought about it, what kind of impact it had, and how I think people should engage with it. So I have decided that we have three important ground rules that we should follow. The first one is that there should be no unfair roasting. I mean, we get it. These books aren't exactly written with us as the target audience. It's been, easy to poke fun, but that wouldn't be fair to the genre or to its fans. So while we might have some laughs, we're going to approach these books with honesty and respect. And as usual, tell everyone who we think the book is for and who it isn't for. And fun fact, I think we can say from the beginning that it's probably not intended for us, but that doesn't mean we can't still enjoy it. Also, I don't know if I'm funny enough to actually do a good roast, so we're going to make sure we have no unfair roasting. A second thing is that we are going to acknowledge the common tropes that we see in these books, or sometimes the bucking of tropes, the anti-tropes that I saw, that in this book in particular, I saw a few that I thought actually made it a more valuable read. But we won't dwell on it because, again, that's a key part of the genre, so it's certainly worth acknowledging. But if we're just sitting here complaining about tropes the entire time, then we're just continuing to undermine a genre that has a lot of people interested, and I would imagine bring a lot of people into reading, which is something that I'm always a big proponent of. And then the last rule is the 2-to-1 rule. Now, Trevor, I did a video on the immensely popular book, The Fourth Wing, and my sister-in-law told me that I had so many negative things to say about the book that I did not have anything nice to say. And I didn't believe that to be the case. So I actually went back and reviewed what I had to say about Fourth Wing. I would like you to guess how many criticisms I had about the book in that video.
I don't know, 10.
Okay. I went and counted, I had 5. I had 5 criticisms about the book. on the flip side of that, I also did try to say some positive things. Could you guess how many positive things that I had to say about the book?
Three.
I thought you were going to say one. No, I had five. So I had an even amount of criticisms and positive things to say about the book, but it's a well-known fact that the criticism is what sticks in people's minds, and so I think the best we can do to make sure we're not just poking as much fun at these books as we possibly can is to try to have this 2-to-1 balance. So we are going to try and say two nice things for every major criticism that we have for these books. So those are our 3 rules: no unfair roasting. We are going to talk about the tropes and the 2-to-1 rule. Okay? Any other thoughts, Trevor, before we dig in?
No, let's get to it.
All right, so I'm going to provide a summary, and as I go along, Trevor, you are going to tell us a little bit about each of the main characters, and we will have probably some spoilers, I think, here in the initial summary. I don't plan on having too many spoilers, but we've decided that as we are trying to discuss this series, see what we liked about it, see what we think is going to happen in the series, it's pretty important that we are able to discuss, clear through the end of the book. And so we will warn you when the spoilers are coming up, but for the time being in this summary, we've tried to keep it spoiler-free. Just a little history about this book. I think the origins of this book is actually something that made it a major appeal to individuals. Throne of Glass is the debut novel of Sarah J. Maas, who now has 2 colossal series. The Throne of Glass, and then A Court of Thorn and Roses, and they are both
And
quite
Crescent
sizable.
City. No,
What's
and
that?
Crescent City.
Well, yes, and we may get to that. That may be one we cover. I don't know, but she actually, this was not just something that was her debut novel. This is something that she'd been working on since a teenager. This was first published in 2012, but her original draft is something that she had started on an online writing platform called Fiction Press, and it was easily like their most popular work, and it gained a really loyal following. And so there was actually some traditional publishers that came for her and said, we would very much be interested in exploring more of this series and seeing a full-fledged novel. And as you can see, it is now turned into this 7-book series, and then I think there's also some short stories or prequels or something that are also involved in it. And so this is really going to be quite the introduction for any author to have such major success, and especially something that she clearly held dear ever since she was a teenager. And I think that is something that will probably be a little evident in this book, and something that I have a few comments on. But let's dig into the actual storyline. The main character is Selena Sordathian, or Sordothian. I'm not entirely sure how to say it. That's one of the fun things about fantasy series. Trevor, would you give us a little description of the main character, Selena?
Yeah, she is the world's most deadly and notorious assassin. Selena is an 18-year-old who, after being captured, has spent a year enslaved in the brutal salt mines of Indovir. It's a slave camp, and she went there as a punishment for her crimes.
Yes. So we actually start out, she's already been there in there for a year, and the book starts with an offer of her freedom. The Crown Prince Dorian, he's got this nice long name, Dorian Havillard II, but he's just referred to as Dorian in the book. He actually invites Selena to be his representative in the King's Tournament to become the King's Champion. And would you please give us a description of Dorian, seeing as though he goes on to play quite the role in this book?
Yeah, he is the crown prince. I think he's like 22 years old. He's charismatic, easygoing, and most importantly, extremely good looking. While he's a lover, not a fighter, he's consistently at odds with his father, the king.
Yes, and we'll see that play out. And so he actually offers her this new alias. She had been this world-renowned assassin, and even though there's going to be quite a few notorious figures at the tournament, apparently the kingdom does not want it to be known exactly who this world-renowned assassin was. So she comes in under an alias, and so she goes to the palace both to compete in the tournament, but also to do some training. She has been in this brutal, salt mine colony for a year, and they even comment that most people don't make it more than a couple months or so, and so she herself is quite emaciated and just very weak and in very poor fighting shape. And so while she is at the palace, she is going to take on a series of challenges that are, of course, designed to test her skills. And she's also going to get some additional training. And so this is where we are introduced to the captain of the guards. I'm going to say Charles Westfall. I don't know if you have a different pronunciation.
Um, I think it's Kale.
Kale. Okay, sure. I should go listen to the audiobooks, huh? To
Oh,
discover.
you read the print, huh?
um, I yes, well, for this one, and we'll see for the future ones. This is an interesting book because we may talk about this in a later video, but the you can get the first couple of these on Libby, but then after that, Audible actually has exclusive rights to them, and so you have to pay for them, or they're much harder to get a hold of. So it is pronounced kale. That is an interesting pronunciation. I will try to keep that in mind. Anyways, care to give us a description of Kale?
Yeah, in addition to being captain of the guard, he is also Prince Dorian's best friend. He is more of the strong, silent type, and he takes his job of protecting the prince very, very seriously. And because of this, he's extremely leery of Selena throughout the story and tries to keep a close eye on her.
Okay, so he also becomes an important character. We do have a few other minor characters that get some attention, especially there in the palace. For example, we do have the king and the queen. I don't know if you have anything you want to say about them, Trevor.
Yeah, let me try to get through these guys quickly. But there's King Dorian Haviliard, I guess, the first, and he is the ruler of the kingdom Aderlon, which he ruthlessly conquered. And he's harsh. He's unkind to the prince and Selena, and just to people in general. You definitely get the vibes that he is up to something, or that he's certainly no good at the very least. And his wife, the queen, is Georgina Haviliard, and she is seems to be the opposite of her husband. She seems to be more concerned with matters of the court and who her son Prince Dorian is going to marry.
Okay. She had, well, we'll get to this, but she has one of my favorite lines. Um, well, we'll get to it.
Okay.
Yes, so those are of course the king and the queen. We do also have some other notable characters in the court, like Duke Parrington, and I don't know anyone else that you want to mention.
Yeah, yeah. So there's Duke Parrington. He's kind of the king's trusted ally. He's also not very likable from the beginning. Kind of the same thing. Just kind of stands out as a bad dude, but certainly in a position of power. And then there's Caltaine Rompier. I'm not sure. And she's just kind of this vain courtier who is being courted by Duke Parrington, or maybe they're betrothed. I don't know. I forget the specifics, but she has her sights on Dorian, which is causing her to see Selena as a rival.
Hmm. And those are, the major court players. Something of note, as we look at the palace, is that I didn't say this, and it becomes evident as the book progresses, and that is that the king has been quite accomplished and quite productive in his conquering of new territories, and so there seems to be a lot of tension between him and the ruling powers that are some that I think are already within his sphere of influence, and there might still be some countries, or at least maybe some rebellion factions, that he is trying to bring under control, or to more fully subdue. As a matter of fact, that's the whole reason that he wants this tournament, is so that he can have someone that can be his assassin. That's not necessarily explicitly named. We calls him a king's champion, but it appears that this person will be employed in forcing whatever sects or whatever portions of the kingdom or the enemies of the kingdom are putting up any kind of resistance. At least that seems to be the implication. So looking at that, do you have any other characters that you think should be noted?
Yeah, let me run through a few. As we've talked about, there's the competition. Some of the notable people in that, and there's Kane, who is Duke Parrington's contestant. He's very large, ruthless, and viewed as the favorite to win the tournament. Certainly Selena has her work cut out against this guy. He's often winning the competitions or whatever. And then there's Knox, who is a thief, and he's another contestant in the tournament. And he and Selena develop kind of a trust, a good rapport, and kind of watch out for each other during the trials.
Okay. And then as I mentioned, there's these elements that are outside of the complete control of the king, and I think that probably the most notable of them that is also there in the court, or at least present in the palace, would be, and again, maybe I'm saying this wrong, but Nehemia,
Mm-hmm.
or is that how
Yeah,
the narrator said it? Okay. And she is the princess of the kingdom of Elway. Any thoughts or any description you care to provide on Nehemia?
yeah, she is just princess of one of the countries that was conquered by the king, and it is one of the countries that is still actively rebelling against the king. And so there's an interesting dynamic there. She has come on good terms, but she's definitely one to keep an eye on. And she and Selena become fast friends, and it's as they kind of rely on each other as outsiders to the court.
Okay. So you have these different court personalities. You have the other competitors. Of course, Selena is the main character. We're also taking. We have. It's told from third person omnipotent, but you mostly follow Selena. There are a few points where they also follow Kale as well as the prince. But obviously, the center focus of this book is the competition and the training for the competition. But as this is going along, there's also going to be certain things that really start to upset people and scare people. And so Selena is actually going to begin to try to seek out and see what is causing these different. There's actually going to be a few murders that are unexpected and in a way that people don't are just going to actually really shock people. And so as Selena starts to try to figure out what exactly is going on, she's going to uncover some dark forces that are threatening the castle and the kingdom itself. And so this is actually where the magic system of the world is going to be alluded to, though it's actually mostly just hinted at. There's not a whole lot of detail given here, so we really don't know the premise of this magic system. We don't know exactly what the scope of it is. We also don't know, if there's going to be some kind of a variety of different life forms. We don't know any of that or anything of that nature. So that is all just kind of being alluded to here. We certainly know that it's going to play a role in both some of the darker elements that are happening, but also there appears to be some kind of magical force or system that is trying to help Selena out as well. So we can see what appears to be some kind of fighting of good and evil, and that seems to be playing out. And so as you have the tournament and the court intrigue and of course this magical element and all the ongoing questions of Selena's background, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but I will tell you that, by the end of this book, the tournament is going to be resolved, and you'll see exactly how that plays out, and you'll see who is our main competitor and what exactly happens to everyone. I won't tell you exactly what happens, although the fact that there's 6 more books should be indicative to you, but hey, I'll let you draw your own conclusions. And, that's the primary purpose of this first book. So, Trevor, any immediate reactions or thoughts on this book itself?
I have a lot of reactions and thoughts, but no, I think for the summary, you pretty well summed it up.
Okay. So, looking at this book and taking into consideration the summary, I want to talk about what were the most notable tropes that you saw. And like I said, I also think that there's some really good anti-tropes in here, or just some moments where she bucked some trends that I thought were really interesting. And so, first of all, what are some of the tropes that stood out to you that you think are worth commenting on, that either really align well with the larger Bromantasy series genre, or some of the tropes that you thought were a little more interesting or engaging?
So, we decided to talk about the tropes, I went on and searched the top romantasy tropes out there and got a list of top 10. And on there are I don't know, 5 to 6 of those, and it's hard to say because both of us,
Oh,
and I'll say spoiler alert potentially because there'll be some spoilers here. I don't want to get in trouble for that, but would also like to point out both of us have only read the first book, so we can't
right.
spoil beyond that, and that's where I don't know with some of these tropes, but it kind of seems like it's leading to that. But there's seems like potentially enemies to lovers
Yeah.
happening, the forbidden love, which maybe kind of a overlap there. We'll talk about this in our theories, but I think
Hmm.
the chosen one, there's where there's a character who's kind of fulfilling a prophecy to save the world or something. Love triangle. Another one that I this is a
So,
theory.
these were part of that top 10 list.
These are all in that top 10 list, and
Yeah.
I think these ones apply to this book. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm skipping the ones that I don't think are applicable. Another one that I think,
What are those other ones? I'm curious into all of them, and I will say, looking at some of the tropes you mentioned, I think, and like you said, we've only read the first book. I think you're right that those will become tropes. They're not immediately evident just yet, or at least they haven't actually come to fruition. For sure, I think this love triangle is definitely going to be part of it, even though nothing has quite happened between her and Kale. But there's definitely suggestion of that, and well, again, we'll get into that in the predictions and stuff. Same with the forbidden love. But what were some of the tropes that they mentioned that aren't in here at all?
okay, well, let me finish the ones I think are, and then I'll tell you
Oh,
those
okay.
ones. So there was secret heritage as well, a character that has a hidden background, perhaps a
Oh yeah.
royal or hidden magical heritage, which I think this kind of alludes to in this book. And then the slow burn, the romance develops gradually. I do think that's ultimately where this is going. Again, we can talk more about that later. There were others. There was fated mates, characters that are destined to be together. I didn't get the sense that that was this one. Reincarnation, lovers are reborn in different lives.
Oh, that's
Again,
a common trope, really.
I that's what the AI gave me. So
Okay.
then magical bonds, and reading this back, I'm thinking, this could apply. There's relationships enhanced or complicated by magical connections. This was talking about soulmates, but I'm just wondering about the connections with that she had. I guess we've already said spoilers, but with Elena, the queen, and then the last one on the list that I hadn't covered was adventure and quest. The romance develops amid adventures. I don't know. I felt like this book was a little bit light on the adventure and quest,
Mhm.
and romance was kind of happening outside of that. But I
Yeah,
suppose,
although I think it is setting it up for it. I think the whole premise that she is now to be at the king's bidding means she's going to be going on adventures, and I don't
yeah.
know how the crown prince would be pulled into that, or the captain of the guards, but I get the impression that that is somehow going to happen.
I have a couple others outside of that I thought, and
Okay.
so there's the tournament or challenge. I
Hmm.
think is an easy one to kind of set up this dynamic of suspense and kind of a plot, um, kind of a another form of often there's a MacGuffin. I think another way to set up a book easily is to have a tournament or contest of some sort especially life threatening. There's the other ones. These ones, I think, where the main protagonist is a female and she just doesn't know that she's beautiful yet, and and this one's kind of anti-trope in some ways because she starts off saying, "I used to be beautiful." So I was like, at least she acknowledges that she was. He doesn't think she is, but then throughout the book, everyone talks about how beautiful she is. So I think it qualifies. And then the other thing was basically where all the main characters are really young, but still all like the top of their field. She's 18 and
Hmm.
she's the best assassin. This other Kaol is young, but has risen to captain of the guard. And so everybody is, and you see that in books where, you'll have like some genius kid, and then somebody else is like the world's master thief or something. So I think those are. I didn't think it was as egregious in this book, but I mean the fact that she's essentially a child, I guess technically an adult, but already the world renowned. I mean, she's been in there for a year, so she was still a child, and she was already the world's deadliest assassin. So,
Yeah, I will certainly touch more upon that when I think of some of my criticisms. But I certainly appreciated that trope was being bucked here. This this helpless, this incapable, and she herself is already shown to be incredibly resilient, to be incredibly talented and skilled, and I think all of that is a nice bucking of the trend, which was something that stood out to me. Any other tropes?
um, no, but what I wanted to say, and I think we'll get into. Well, actually, I'll save that for likes and dislikes. So, no, but what I actually all of that I think I'll save for a later portion. So now, how about you? What did I miss?
So I agree with pretty much all of those. Let me think real quick if there are any anti-tropes that I thought were particularly well done. I have one that I'll go into a little more detail in the likes and dislikes as well. But I appreciate that her background, her family background, is a big mystery, which is not totally uncommon, but there is not an immediate dismissal of her family. And I feel like that's really common in books. And I think it's in part to the audience that these books are meant to appeal to. There's this hope of, all teenage girls think that they're misunderstood. And so I think it's pretty common to have a dismissiveness of family members. You see it in Twilight. She completely dismisses her dad and her mom's opinions on things. You see this in A Court of Thorn and Roses. Same thing there, where she has like no regard for her family and is quite dismissive of them. And I appreciated that wasn't here. And there certainly is a big question of what exactly is her background, and I know, or I'm assuming that's a big part of what will be explored later in the series. That being said, I do still have some questions about that element. Another trope, which is super common, is that she loves books. Which, to be fair, is something that is not just in romantasy. I feel like it's in fantasy as a whole to have main characters that are either into books, or you always have, if it's a group of people going on a quest, you always have some individual that is going to be very literate. And I think of like Wheel of Time. You have the Ogier who is becomes the de facto scribe, and he's always got a book on him. This takes a little bit of liberty to have that in any kind of series that has a high medieval fantasy paradigm, because truth be told, books were virtually non-existent at that time, and very few people would have been literate. And so it does take some adjusting to that high medieval paradigm, but that's not uncommon to all types of fantasy. So I'm gonna save a stronger discussion of that for the criticisms, but that was certainly a common trope in this as well, is her obsession with reading. And again, I think that's meant to appeal to a particular demographic. Those are the tropes that stood out to me. So let's take a look at our predictions. We've both only read the first book. I know nothing. I know the things that have been alluded to. I don't really know where else I expect this series to go exactly. I have some thoughts, but I don't know if you wanted to give us your strongest predictions. I don't know if you want to start with maybe your first three big predictions, or whatever approach you want to take to telling us what you think is going to happen.
I really don't know, and I don't know if that's necessarily a criticism of this book, because I feel like it's starting to. This book was really very much like just setting the stage, setting the table for the rest of the series. I don't know how much of it she had planned out at this point. As you mentioned, she wrote this one when she was still very young, and it went through a lot of different drafts and revisions, over the years, until she ended up with this version of it that is now the book we all know and love. But I don't, I don't really know. I mean, obviously, I think that it's going to get to the point where she is saving the world. I do think that will be a thing. That is not a very bold prediction. Most of mine go back to these tropes that I alluded to. I do think, in terms of the love triangle,
So you say
that
saving the world.
Yeah.
Are you thinking in terms of a magical conflict and saving all of the human realm versus some kind of other demonic realm, or are you thinking more of taking on the king himself, or what possible ways of saving the world do you think are in store or possibly in store?
Yes and yes. Yeah, I think that'll be some sort of version of both. Whether the king remains the big bad throughout or whether it's something else, I think obviously there will be more magical forces coming in. Whether he remains that main antagonist or not, I would guess the series concludes with, um, the this empire being broken up, freeing the countries to be their own independent countries, as well as freeing magic, allowing it to be magic in the world again, but also saving it from evil magic of some sort. That would be my guess as to where this is going. How it gets there and whatever. There's probably way too much ahead of us to figure all of that out. Um, yeah. So in terms of big picture, I don't know. That's what I see. I don't think we know enough about the magic system or this magical universe yet, how things work to really have a good sense. And she hasn't really set up, not like a Harry Potter where there's like a Voldemort that that you're gonna have to face at some point. Because the king could easily be discarded in the next book for someone much more powerful or evil. So I don't know. I could see it going in a number of directions in that regard.
Yeah, and I will say, so like you said, there's no necessarily like Voldemort character that's been presented yet. However, and this is a big spoiler, um, there is you find out that the murders that are happening, there's a demonic force to them, and so you know that magic is being employed in that way, and so you know there's an evil element, and whether there is an individual behind that evil element, we don't know yet. That is certainly something that hasn't really been discussed. But even also whatever the good element is, we don't know a ton about, and that was one of the things I thought was interesting. I love to have a well-explained magic system, but I also thought that they had just these few like throwaway lines that I think were meant to be, hints at the fact that you not only don't know much about the magic system, you live in a world that has mixed beliefs on that magic system. So she talks about how, they pass through a place where there had supposedly been fae, and you find out that, the guards with her don't believe in any of that. They don't think that's real. And so you have this sense that, oh, you have the king and his empire, and you have imperial might, and that's enough to just disregard any kind of magical system, and they have stamped it out, and they've brought it under their own control or whatever, and so that's one of those things that's just kind of being hinted at. We don't know much else, and you don't know if there is going to be a big conflict of magic versus humans, or if there is some kind of both good and bad magic, more like a Harry Potter approach where you just have magic and you have some people that use it for good and some people that use it for evil. So I don't know for sure either about how exactly all that's going to play out, but I think you're right that there is definitely going to be some sense of world saving. And I will say, looking at predictions, we've already said that there is definitely hinted a love triangle. And I think the thing that really sets that up the most is the fact that she obviously cares for Kale. Like that like seems to be the most obvious romance that's brewing, but it is the prince that gets all of the attention, and it is the prince that I think that she is going a long way in trying to show that he is obnoxious. He is, born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He doesn't really have any cares in the world, but he also does balk at his father's ambitions, and he definitely balks at his father's approach and the cruelty of his father. And so I think that is setting them up for some kind of split. I don't know exactly what that'll look like. I don't know if he'll start a civil war, if he'll be exiled, and he and Selena are going to lead the resistance. I have no idea exactly what that's going to look like. Also, I don't know in terms of this love triangle. I mean, I personally found Kale more interesting and a more likable person, and I think that she could try to go a long ways in getting me to like Dorian more, but I don't think I would ever say that I like Dorian more. But I think for the overall storyline, if she's going to save the world, if there's going to be some element of her like becoming the queen at the end, she'd have to end up with Dorian, right? I mean, at least that. I mean, that's the sense I'm getting with the seeds that are being sown at the moment.
So I definitely think Kale is the end game.
You think so?
I think that is who she ends up with. I kind of felt that from the beginning, but I'll say this, and this was I was going to mention this in my likes as well. Is I love it when like it's okay, like love triangles are a thing. They've existed long before. I mean, it's kind of in Lord of the Rings, although
Are they though? I mean,
it's played out more
they
in
are
the
in
movie.
literature.
What's that?
I mean, I know they are in literature.
Well, that's what I mean. That's
Um,
what I mean in terms of tropes.
okay,
But
okay.
I think it's played out like sometimes it's the decision's made for you because one, it turns out is just like a big jerk or he's the villain or whatever, and then it's easy decision. Okay, I'm going with this guy. I like it when there's some nuance there. And as I was reading the book, I kept trying to figure out. I was like, oh, I think they're trying to pull a fast one on us. I think they want us to think it's the prince, but really it's going to be Kale. And then as time went on, I saw her with Kale, and there's one scene where Kale and the prince were talking about it, and I was like, oh, so they're acknowledging that Kale kind of likes her, or they're hinting at that. And then I was like, so maybe that is the switch that you think it. I kept going
Well,
back and
and
I
you
was
had
like,
one of
maybe
the
I'm overcomplicating it. I think at the end of the day, the end game, I think the prince was now short term, and maybe there's 7, 8 books. At some point, they might get together again, but I think Kale is the big picture. That's who she ends up with.
okay. I mean, I definitely think he's a more likable, but I think she was also leaving room for the prince to grow.
Mm.
If I had my way, that is what would happen. The prince would certainly grow.
You would end up with Kale?
Yes, if I had my way.
Okay.
um, no, if I had my way in the writing of the series, based off what I know so far, I would certainly continue to see the prince grow and become a more serious person,
Mm.
and become a more involved politically, politically involved, and challenge his father more, and possibly become the inheritor of the throne that helps to reestablish all the kingdoms that he's taken over and stuff like that. But I just don't like him enough to think that one that she should even end up with him. But I also don't even think he should be a distraction. I didn't find him appealing enough or interesting enough to even let him be that. I thought that he is possibly an interesting character that can be written in a way that makes the series more interesting because we see him grow. But this whole question of will they end up together, or just will it be this ongoing love triangle? And I, I, I just didn't think he was interesting enough for that. But I certainly saw that she was writing him in a way that left room for growth, which I thought was important.
I think that's a good point.
So that's my belief. I will say, and again, this is a spoiler, but at the very end, when she is named the King's Champion, and he says, "You will do everything I say, or I will capture and torture and kill everyone you love," and he starts with Kale, and Kale's family is who he identifies. So it becomes, recognized by not just the king, but I guess the court as a whole, that there has been something developing between her and Kale, at least in terms of a strong connection, and at the very least, a really strong friendship, if not a romance. And so I would say that, that became obvious to the rest of the court. And, I think we'll see how that plays out. I do think again, this is one of the things where they set up with her winning the tournament. I don't think I mentioned this, but she then is given a set amount of time that she will serve as the King's Champion before she is then granted her freedom. And I think that I don't know exactly how that's going to play out, but the fact that they gave a timeline leads me to believe, that's the purpose of having so many books in this series, is we will now see her take on the role of being the King's Champion, and she will be the King's Champion at least for several of the books. Now, whether we start seeing her undermining the king in one way or another, or just exactly what her approach is, I don't know yet, but we will either see her finish out her time as the King's Champion, and then a matter of once she gets her freedom, what she does with it, Or I think we'll possibly see that even as the King's champion, she starts to do things to undermine the King. I'm assuming this gives her, some kind of access to exploring the world around her, and this might give her an opportunity to set up relationships and connections. I don't know for sure. We'll find out as the book plays out. But I know, I'm pretty sure the fact that she is the King's champion will be a significant part of the next several books, and continue to set the stage for what exactly is going to happen. Any other
Can I
predictions that you
point out
have?
how I like that we covered the love triangle before we got to that other major plot point that we spent as much time as we did discussing who we end up with. So, yeah, there's a couple others. I talked about this with the tropes as well. In that I think she has some sort of secret heritage. We don't know anything about her parents. We know she was orphaned and they were killed, and there's obviously more to that backstory. I like that we're not necessarily given all that yet, and there's something to wonder. But I'm guessing they will have also been king, queen, or magical, or some sort of heritage there that is going to empower her or set her apart as somebody important as this battle magic or whatever goes on. I do think that she will have some sort of important heritage either revealed to her, or she already knows and can reveal that. But I think that'll be key point, I think, as it goes on.
Okay, so that's interesting. I thought for sure she at least came from like maybe a family, a noble title or something. Was my impression. I mean, that's where she got some of her resources. Like I said, she loves books, which would mean she'd have to have access to some kind of private library. This is well before there were public libraries, and so I assumed that she was maybe like the daughter of some I don't know my different titles. We'll say a duke. That's not in the line of the king, is it? I don't know, but you think that she may have actually been like in line of authority or a succession. You think that that's a possibility with her, or you also said you think that a magical origin. I mean, that's an interesting theory, because the book, when she does have some kind of encounter with some magical force, they suggest she is some kind of chosen one, and so maybe that employs some kind of magical heritage.
Well, and the fact that Queen Elena comes to her and gives her kind of this mission, says, "You must do this, you must do
Mm-hmm.
this." There's obviously something there, and I think that'll come into it. Um, a couple other minor ones is a couple characters that I think may come into play, and maybe they won't. Maybe I'm way off on this, but I think Caltaine, or whatever her name is, the other girl from the court who doesn't like Selena. She sees her as a rival.
Mm-hmm.
I could see her, because she was betrayed by the Duke in the end, is kind of cast aside. I could see her somehow coming back in the storyline, and there being some sort of team up, or needing to reluctantly rely on each other to help each other out. I could see something like that coming. And then Knox, who she befriended during the trials, she let him go and she kind of helped him escape. I could see him coming back in and being this other guy that shows up later. Again, with the series this long,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be hard not to see that, setting up something, him coming back in. For a minute there, I thought, is this going to go from a love triangle to a love square, or whatever you call it, and throw him in? I don't think there was any implied romance there. I think they were just friends, but I could see him coming back as well. But who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. But I do think you're right. Since so much of this book was, setting the stage, I think that I suspect that, all those somewhat minor characters will go on to play at least a recurring role, or at least we'll see them again, if not a sizable role in the subsequent books. But we'll see. I mean, we are on this journey together, Trevor.
And I love this because you mentioned how our friendship began off a lot centered around a lot about Harry Potter, and the fun thing was when we met, what was it, the fourth book was out, and so and none of the movies when we first met, and so it was just fun to have those books to look forward to and theorize and do all that before it was released. Now, obviously, this whole series was released, that information is out there, but since we're reading at the same pace, we can kind of go through this and theorize together, and both of us, have no clue what is going to happen. So it's going to be kind of fun as we get to see just how wrong we really are.
Yeah, and I look forward to seeing that. So let's move on to our likes and our dislikes, our 2-to-1 section. I can start. I have a few criticisms, but I also had some things that I liked about it. So probably the first, my two nice things to say is I certainly love the fact that she is an assassin. I mean, not that I love assassins, but I just think that does give her a very interesting background. And I certainly enjoy the fact that she's not helpless, and so there is some kind of a strong female lead to that I think is much more interesting than some of the other series, or at least other romantasy books that I've picked up. I would also say, in that same vein, I do also really like the fact that it's a long series, and it has clearly a lot of development that is still going to happen. And I like that this book was written in a way that that you're just setting the scene for subsequent books. I've read a couple really big series that it was unclear at the end of the first book whether they knew it was going to be a longer series or not. And so you actually have relatively tidy endings to some books that then have subsequent books to them, and you're like, well, I think it would have been fine if you had acknowledged from the get-go that this was going to be a larger series. And so I actually liked that this book is, there's a lot of setting the stage. That being said, probably my biggest criticism about the setting of the stage in this series is that I didn't feel like she set the stage enough. I felt like, I thought some things were strategic. So I thought, not giving us a full understanding of what the magic system is, that was strategic. I thought that was good. But I didn't feel like I had a real understanding of what exactly is at stake in some cases, especially when it comes to just like the relationships or the dialogue. I think the dialogue in particular, I thought it got better as it progressed, but at the very beginning, I thought it was just a little too stilted, and it just didn't really make a lot of sense. I didn't think it really reflected her experience. So, like, one of the first interactions she has with Kale, I think it's meant to have this impression of being like witty, but it's not. It's just sarcastic. And I personally do not think that sarcasm is a good substitute for wittiness. And so I thought that did improve by the end, but definitely at the beginning, I felt like it was just a little too much of a skeleton of what she wanted it to be. But that's fine. It's her first book. And I certainly thought that there was improvement by the end of this book. And I certainly know in some of her later books that I've read that she certainly gets better at writing dialogue. And I will say that was probably one of the criticisms that I had, is just that I didn't think that all of the dialogue was particularly impressive. I mentioned one of my favorite lines comes from the Queen, and she just has this, it's just painful, where she says, don't mean to tell me you plan on marrying for love. And I'm just like, okay, look, we all know that there's a major dynamic in court life about marrying for politics and marrying for alliances, but I mean, that was just a little too bold-faced and blatant, that I was just like, that's a silly line. Like, you have to understand that's a dumb line, right? The idea of marrying for love being a silly thing is completely different from recognizing that it's just not always the reality of the situation. I mean, those are two very different positions to take. And so for you to try and use that as this, positioning of just the absurdity of the proposition, I didn't care for that. Or like I started referencing one of their first conversations between Kale and Selena, where, she's just like kind of not talking to him, and he makes a comment complaining, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I just didn't think that deserved a verbal response. And I was like, that's not witty, just because you're using a slightly larger word, but verbal's really not even that big of a word. You're just a little too stilted here and a little too artificial in your conversation. But like I said, I certainly thought that improved by the end, and I hope to see it continue to improve throughout the rest of the series. So that would be my first criticism. What about you, Trevor? What criticisms? What are two likes and a criticism that you would like to propose?
Well, mine are all going to be jumbled now, because I kind of want to respond to yours, because we have some overlap. And I would like to say, I mean, we've talked about how young she was when she started writing this, even though it was edited and went on. So I read other books first. I read the first three Akatar back in this was during COVID. I went
Okay.
through those, and so I know what how she becomes as an author. And this first book, um, I don't think it's a slight to her as an author. To I say, it does feel like it was a little bit the writing wasn't quite as developed as she becomes as she gets it. It's just a reality though. But so I just want to acknowledge that I see all that, but at the same time there were some issues. But I do like were and again I'm trying to sort through what was your first thing you said you liked on this first one? I
Well,
have a thought.
I really like that she's an assassin, that she's not helpless, that she has, I think there's a long ways to go in explaining exactly what her skills are. I have no idea, even after a tournament, what she's supposed to be particularly good at, but I appreciate that she is not helpless. And I think that that was a nice bucking of a trend that also made her an inherently interesting character, even if she wasn't always written in a particularly interesting way.
Yeah, I'll okay, so I'll say first on your second point is that I do think that in terms of as I was just saying, I don't think her writing is where it gets to, but you can tell that she's a good writer. Like as much as this book was not really for me, and I think that there were plenty of criticisms along the way or things that I wanted to see just a little bit more from her. You can still
Mm-hmm.
tell like this is an easy read, like it's not full of errors and mistakes and um like that there's another level she can take, but there's still a certain level of talent that she has, and so I appreciated that. And then two, I liked, and this goes to your point, is that how kind of trimmed down this book is, and the extent like the very first scene it starts off, and
Mm-hmm.
it is setting the stage for the whole book, and that starts off the story right from the get go. You learn who the major players are. You learn what this book is going to be about, and it sets the stage for that, and it takes us along the way. The thing that I would dislike about that though is that after that fast start, it kind of slows down and doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really give you much for a while, and then not a lot. I mean, even though things happen throughout the book, not a lot happens. Also, like
Right.
she got like so. There's three major storylines in this book. I would say there's the tournament, then what becomes clearly the love triangle, and then also then once she gets to the castle, it's this mystery of these murders that are happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the of those three, the the tournament is what's set up as like this primary storyline from the get go, but it's clearly gets pushed to the background as you
Mm-hmm.
go along. And she yada yadas over several deaths, several of the trials, and I'm guessing this was in order to help keep this book trim. I'm sure that was as you went through revision, she had to cut things, and so in some ways I can appreciate that. But uh, you know, you had these other two storylines, and the murders even that becomes like the predominant storyline, or at least what it's supposed to be, but that doesn't really pick up until you get closer to, I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
halfway through the book when you actually start digging in on that a little bit more. And so that leaves really this love triangle at the forefront, and it's a lot of conversations in her chambers or during training and stuff, where you have like so much of the dialogue is centered around, oh, let me ask the prince about his crush. How'd things go with her? Like while we're sword fighting, it's like, yeah, that's definitely how two bros like talk while they're sword fighting. Or she had a conversation with Kale about the prince, with the prince about Kale. Those two together. She even has Knox, her friend from the tournament. They're training and working out together, and he asks her about the prince at one point. And so like it's just a series of people asking each other about their crushes. And where these other major storylines get kind of lost in that a little bit. And so
Yeah.
so in that sense it's not giving you as much with these more, I say more, I guess that's subjective, but these other storylines that are meant to be the backbone of this story, and really the focus is on this love triangle that's going on, which you kind of get, like you set the stage. There's only so much, I feel like, a juice you can squeeze from that, but she kind of keeps going back to it again and again. And so I really like, I wouldn't say I really like, but I think there's really good setting there, a really good kind of bone structure to what she wants to present. It's getting the right amount of things on there. And you'd mentioned the magic system. Like, not every book has to be Brandon Sanderson. Let's just like roll out the super intense magic system off the bat. I've read other really good high fantasy novels that take a while to even like really get into that magic system. So that for me, it was actually okay. It's like you don't have to throw it all out there right away. I think that's good. And we're gonna start, because magic has been banished. We can learn along with Selena, and figure that out. We don't have to just be kind of given this whole exposition right off the bat to try to, and take notes and everything. So that was a very long-winded and convoluted way to cover a lot of points I think that you covered. But it's like, for me, it's all, there's a lot of stuff there and some good ideas. It's just like with the execution, I feel like it doesn't quite hit home for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I would certainly agree with, well, okay. Let me move into my second series, because I feel like to fully respond to that really dives into my third and my biggest critique. And this one, we've talked about this. So let me start by things that I do like. So I certainly, like I said before, I actually like that we don't know what has happened to her parents. We don't know exactly her heritage or anything like that. But there isn't a straight up dismissal of her parents. I appreciate that. I actually think that is a valuable thing that is not, maybe I've just read too many of the wrong romantasy books, but I feel like there's just this quick dismissal of family in a way that I'm not comfortable with. Like I understand that as a youth, you may not feel like people understand you, and I think that might be part of the way that she's tried to target this to a particular audience. But I still just don't love the idea of saying, well, I don't know, or I hate my family, or my family doesn't understand me, or anything like that. And so that's one thing that I really appreciated, that there's not a straight up dismissal of our family, although we don't know exactly how that's going to turn out. What's another thing that I really like? I certainly enjoy the fact that there is multiple elements to this world building, in terms of it is, we have the political intrigue. You certainly have questions of what is going on in this larger empire. The king is clearly being designed and being presented as an absolute jerk, and someone that's not just really ambitious, but also cruel in a way. And then we have this larger question of what exactly is going on with the more fantasy element of it, particularly the magic system. I enjoy that we have this on multiple fronts. And I thought the premise of not just the tournament, but then also having people at the palace to provide more information, I thought that was well structured. But going back to what you said, I agree with the fact that there is a complete shortage of, well, not a complete shortage, but you do skip over some of what would also make it really interesting in terms of describing some of the fight scenes. Like I said, I still don't even know what she's good at. She's an assassin, but we don't know, like, what's her weapon of choice. I know it tends to be a bow and arrow in a series like this, but I don't know if it is. I don't remember her ever saying what her weapon of choice is. There was a few references, I think, to like having a dagger on her or something, but that was it. Like, we don't know exactly what she's trained in. She's an assassin. She's not just a good fighter, she's an assassin. How did she kill people? Like, what was her system? We don't know. But again, I will also save that to my final criticism. I'm just saying that I certainly think that there is some room for explanation in terms of, or some room for giving more scenes that give us both. I'm fine with these conversations that are happening between her and all the other characters, but I do think it's also okay to explain some of what would have been some of the more interesting scenes, in my opinion, to have explained. But that could just totally be a question of, we're not her target audience, so she feels no desire to give us the fight scenes or just more explanation in that regard. But I will say, probably the trope that I struggled with the most in this, and it's not because I hate the trope, but because I thought it just literally did not make sense, was her love of books. Now, I love books, and again, It's okay to be liberal with a high medieval paradigm and say, yes, there's people that like books, even though no, books virtually did not exist. In the high medieval time period, you were considered incredibly wealthy, and your library was massive if it had, say, a dozen books in it. So this idea that she is in a library that has 1,000,000 volumes, that's rare in today's world, in mass-produced books. Very few libraries are going to have 1,000,000 plus books. And so I found that to just be a little silly, but common in the tropes. But where it just was too much, it was jumping the shark to me, was the fact that she loves books so much when it literally just does not add up to her life. If you look at the fact that she's really young, she's 18, so already she has a very limited time that she could have even become obsessed with books. She has been in this prison colony for the last year, which has been brutal, so brutal that she talks about how it has affected her health, how she has to spend the first several months out of there just regaining weight and regaining her muscle. And before that, she was an assassin, a world-renowned assassin, which I would imagine a modern-day assassin, that would take a lot of your time to be a good assassin. And in the past, just getting to a new place and figuring out how you're going to kill a person, that's going to take a lot of time, and not to mention the actual training to become an assassin. So all of this is being done in her teen years. It had to have been. And so where in the world is there a time for that to be in love with books? It just does not add up in this case. I understand that you are trying to appeal to a very specific audience, that they love books, hence why they're reading this book. But you also have to have it mathematically make sense. And in this case, it like just doesn't to me. On top of that, and I thought this was just a dumb addition. She not only loves books, they make it a point to say she likes smut. That is what she reads. I thought that was just so dumb. I was like, oh, come on. I understand that you want this to be a person that people can relate to, but guess what? That just shouldn't be the thing that they can relate to. Find other things about her that they can relate to. But this idea that she, again, like literally has not had the time to fall in love with books, yet the book she falls in love with is smut. I mean, I found that an absurd trope that I think a tactful author who understood that they wanted this to be something to appeal to their target audience could have found slightly better ways to present it, and not have her be so ambitious about books, and not have it try to be her defining feature when it just couldn't be. There just wasn't space for it in her short life. Something needed to be changed for that to make any sense. And yeah, so that there's a lot of tropes in these series, and I don't want to just like rail on all of them. They have an appeal. I just think that it can still be done well, and in this case, it was done terribly, and I found it painfully, added in an effort to appeal to a specific group. I mean, obviously, the girl when she wrote this, she was a girl, so I could see why that would have been appealing to her as a girl. But I would like to think by the time she actually wrote it and went through and edited it, she could have seen, you know what, that really just does not make sense. I would like it to, but I have to be honest in this case, and it's just not going to make sense. But that is my trope to hate in this book. That is my trope that I just thought it was dumb. It was, nah.
I agree with everything you just said, but in defense of it, I did get the vibe. This is a minor defense, that it was the world was set probably slightly post medieval. I mean, yeah, I think your point's still applicable, but then the other thing about the smut, I agree with you. It was weird. It did feel out of place, because even let's say there are books, I don't think that at that point in time that was the way literature had.
Well, in a library with 1,000,000 books,
Right.
I'm sure you could find it.
But I do think she makes a point throughout it to point that she's well read in a variety of subjects. She just also happens to like that. So again, I agree with your point. I'm just coming to defense a little bit, and I think the meta commentary on, again, when she wrote this, she hadn't written ACOTAR. She wasn't famous for, what is it, chapter 55 or whatever. But the point. I guess my point, the little meta commentary there, nod to herself a little bit, I think is like kind of funny. I do agree. I don't think it's worth the detraction that it takes from, I think, the book and the storyline. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to defend the other side a little bit on that one.
Well, and again, I know why it's there. I just thought it was it was exaggerated to have a certain appeal. And to me, it's like, well, you could have just toned it down a little and and still have the majority of the appeal. So my two big criticisms so far had been some of the writing early on is a little stilted, and I think needed just a little revising to just make it a little more authentic and realistic. I think though that gets better, and I certainly don't think that would by any ways detract from the target audience. Same with here. I think that just massaging it a little could have still had a majority of the effect, but just, trying to make it just a little more realistic. So maybe have her discovering smut for the first time. That would have actually probably been easier to write, in my opinion. She now has a library with 1 million volumes and discovering it. I think that would have been an interesting scene that she could have written that would have made more sense to me. But this idea that this 18-year-old girl who has spent a last year in a prison colony, spent years before that as an assassin, spent years before that training to be an assassin, she's in love with smut? I mean, where? You just don't have that time or space. And so
I mean, where are this girl's parents?
Well,
oh, sorry, that's a poor subject.
I think we will find out. There's one line in there, isn't there? As I recall, there's like one line about waking up with my parents gone, or like there's some reference to I could have misread it, but I was under the impression it was saying like her parents were brutally murdered or something along those lines. That I don't think it was super clear, but that was what was being alluded to. Which is something that so here's my final criticism. So here's the two things that I want to add. I really enjoy that there was some subtlety for sure. The fact that we, again, I know I already said this, but the fact that the magic system is not just thrown out there and you get to figure it out, I thought that was a great subtlety. It wasn't just her being lazy in developing the world. I think in her mind she had a magical system, a magical world, and we get to find out as we go along. I think that's great. I love that element of a big fantasy series. Yes.
I was just going to say she gave a tidbit on their journey to the kingdom, from the prison to the castle. She gave a little bit, where there used to be, they're going through the forest. And so she hints at the possibilities because she does hint at other creatures or fae and some other things and the type of magic. So she gives just enough to like paint a picture. Okay, this is kind of more or less in this ballpark what I can expect, but obviously there's more to come. And I thought that was enough to like set the stage a little bit to kind of, okay, now we're a little bit grounded in this world. So I actually thought that was well done.
Yeah. I thought similarly, like I already said, with the fact that there's a more complicated world in terms of the political elements as well as this magical element. I thought that the political elements were generally somewhat nuanced. I don't fully understand the scope of the political sphere just yet. And I don't exactly know how exactly she is going to engage with whatever the larger political world is. And we've also said that we don't even know how she engaged with it before. You don't know if you think that her family is possibly some kind of nobility. It appears that she did know her family. So if that is a big surprise, it is her withholding that information from us. It is not going to be a discovery necessarily if her dad was king of some kingdom that has since been eradicated or overtaken. But I certainly appreciated there were those elements of subtlety. So she does have this whole first book that has some world building, and she does also manage to still keep some important subtleties that I think are setting the stage for how you're going to find out the rest. Here's my biggest criticism, and admittedly, this is probably the thing that I will get the most hate for, because I do think that is something that if it was fixed, it could fundamentally change who the target audience would be. And so with my other two criticisms, I think it was just things that it could have been done a little better and you still would have had the same appeal. It just would have made it like slightly better literature. I just do not think the dialogue, her inner monologue, any of it matches remotely her experience. It's just not there. You cannot tell me she spent a year in this death camp where most people would have died already, and that she comes out and her priority is still getting to that library and reading smut. That's just not how a human being would be. You can't tell me that she would come out of it and still be oh so interested in what the heck is going on with this prince. Who is he interested in? That just would not. I mean, this is someone whose self-preservation would have been such a priority to her, and I just imagine you would see her to be a far more reflective person at this point in her life. Not to mention, she is a trained assassin. When I think of trained assassins in literature, I think of people like Arya Stark. Can you imagine Arya Stark sounding remotely like this girl? Like that is completely incongruent, and that is where I have an issue with the writing in this book, is that she has given us the details of a very fascinating character, but she has given us the inner monologue of a very bland character. And I will confess that was the biggest thing that took me out of this, that I don't have an easy fix to, and I do think that if you rewrote it in a way that made it more reflective of everything that she has supposedly gone through in her life, you would get much more the Diary of Anne Frank and much less, this version of Twilight where she is actually a capable person. And that is where I have my biggest criticism, and I will probably get a lot of hate for that. But I just thought that incongruency was too obvious, and just it really detracted from the quality of this book. I hope that changes, but I don't know how it would. I mean, this is someone who has supposedly spent years killing people, and yet that just was not manifested. Like, she still got sick at the sight of blood and stuff, and I was just like, that you're not matching up the character you've described with the character that you're actually presenting, and I thought that was problematic.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I want to get on that because that goes pretty much right in line with my last criticism. But I want to. We've kind of jumped all over, and a lot of things have gotten jumbled. So I'm going to say actually more than two things I think that I liked. So I
Okay,
can
good, because I'm not sure
I get
my
them
two
all
things are
in
coming
there
through.
because I want to get those all in there because the last thing it goes along with that, and I think you hit on some really good things there. But and they, I think everything I say ties to this, but and some of this was along the lines that we already talked about with the tropes. But one thing I want to point out is that she was early in on. I wouldn't say she defined this genre, but she was one of the earlier works of this genre that helped define it. And so there are a lot of tropes in this, which I don't think is a problem. Like a lot of books we love that are targeted for us are still going to have a lot of those tropes.
I agree with that 100%.
So
I think tropes are a good thing. It's when it's not well done that I suddenly dislike a trope.
and yeah, absolutely. And so but if there is any criticism or thought, oh, this is just like the same thing but some people were saying that about Dune. They're like, we've seen all this stuff before, not failing to understand that Dune was the precursor to all these other works that were pulling from Dune. Like Dune set the ground for a lot of these. And I'm not saying this was necessarily the Dune of romanticism, but I'm just saying, like, I think it's fair to acknowledge, like, she was in early and definitely helped shape the genre. And I think also she continued to grow with it and evolve with it. And I will say, my wife, who, again, loves these books, she loves this series. She had a hard time getting through the first three. I used to tease her because, she's like, oh, it's a good series. I think you might like it. You just have to read 3.5 books before you start getting into it. So it reminded me of on Seinfeld when Elaine has the punch card for a bad sandwich, but she's almost earned her free sandwich. And they're like, don't punch too much. She's like, but I've almost earned my free sandwich. So you just got to keep working through, but the payoffs there. So I'm going to assume that, because I have read other works from her that, again, still weren't targeted at me. I still had plenty of complaints, but, were more evolved in writing. I trust that she'll get there. And I know that she has the capability to pull in a lot of surprises or anti-tropes, even that really make, I think, a satisfying read. And so I think a lot of that will be there. I think she builds on, I believe that she'll build on the nuance of these characters, but it's not there yet, to your point. But a couple other things before I get in on that was just, I had mentioned the love triangle earlier. I just want to say I do think it's well done in the sense that it did keep me guessing, and I think that's something that will continue to play out through the books. But a big thing I like is there's a theme of freedom in these books that I think really it plays out differently in different characters, and what I think this meaning of freedom means to them, whether it's her, being free from the prison, or being free from a ruler, this guy taught her, to be an assassin, or free, Chaol being, his issue with his parents, or the prince and the freedom from
Hmm.
his Nehemia, literal freedom for her people, and so on. And so I think it plays out, and that's an interesting idea. But like everything else, I don't think it's given the nuance that it needs. And then my last thing to your point, as I don't want to belabor it too much, is just there is too much inconsistency with the characters. And to the mention of freedom, she even says at one point, when she's talking to Nehemia at the end, when they're doing kind of the wrap up, and she says, don't, there's not, this is a quote, there's not a moment that goes by when I don't wonder what it will be like to kill for him, the man who destroyed everything that I loved. And that's not true. From like the very first chapter, she's talking about, oh, here's this prince, the son of that guy who took everything I loved. He's got nice eyes, or he's handsome, or whatever. And she's in a romantic relationship with him, and it wasn't hard at all, especially when you talk about, I mean, yeah, he's supposed to be charismatic, which again, this goes back to the dialogue is not the most, it's not the
Yeah.
best dialogue, so it comes off kind of cheesy, whatever. But let's just assume we find him as charismatic as he's supposed to be. She just like falls for it so quickly. There's the whole thing. I don't know. She tries to have her be everything. She's like super
Yeah.
likable. She loves candy. She loves reading.
Oh
She's
yeah.
so well rounded. She plays music. On top
Oh
of all
yeah.
that,
Yeah.
she kills people. But at the same time, she's like, oh, the thought of Chaol, who up to this point I've only argued with, battle and dying just makes me sick. So she's like overflowing with empathy for all these people, but yet has no issue and like no trauma from all the killing that she's done
Yeah.
throughout her past. Like she doesn't carry any of that weight, any of that darkness with her. At least it's not presented to us, right? And I feel like that with all the characters. They're very there's potential there for depth, like the prince and some of his struggles. Or I do like that at least he's not completely likable. Like you said, there's room for growth. Or some of the other characters, but it feels like it's too much. Everybody is all good, like they all, like everybody who you were supposed to like is saying, oh no, those are terrible things, oh no, we all love this, oh, we all want good things for everybody. And the people who are bad are, oh no, we are going to be bad. And there's no surprises. Like at the end of the day, Cain is the guy who's a bad guy, and the king
Yeah.
was behind it all. Like, there's just no nuance there for these characters. And the last thing, because I mentioned freedom, was that when she goes down and she sees the boats, and she's like, "Oh, this is my chance to escape." She's like, "No, I need to go back." And play out this tournament and do my time and earn my freedom the right way. And the quote is, "It is the right thing to do." This person who's just assassinated like for her whole life and killed all these people, and now hates this king so much and cannot stand the thought to kill for him, be around him, work for him,
Yeah.
and hates him and despises him, says, I should go back out, play out this tournament, hope that I win, then I get, especially when written into the
I'll kill
script,
for him for 4 years, and
like,
then
that would be the right thing to do. Like,
yeah, that's
what?
the right thing to
People
do.
go
Yeah.
like kill the king or something. You're an assassin. Like, get out. Like that did not seem like what her thought process would be. And then, especially because you had written into the plot later, the Queen Elena, whatever, comes to her and says, "You need to go back." I would have loved if she had made the decision. I have to go back, get those resources. Then, she goes throughout those events, gets that vision, and says, "Hey, you need to go do these things. You have to stay. You have to win the tournament." And now she's saying, now she has this conflict of, I want the freedom. I have this plan. I'm ready to leave. No, there's something bigger. And then she chooses the bigger thing. That to me would have been more interesting, other than just saying, chance to go. Nah, I'm cool. And so it feels like missed opportunities to give added depth to these characters
Yeah.
and make it feel more realistic instead of kind of 2D. It felt like Maas really wanted this character to be like so likable and have a little bit of everything, like be a cool bad A, but also be super likable and well-rounded and empathetic. And it's just, I don't know. I would have liked a little bit more internal struggle with the character.
Yeah, so I agree with you, and I think that's a good way to put it. Is that like I said, mathematically, she couldn't like books. I mean, that's not going to appeal to people. But your point of saying she wanted her to be everything, I think that's the problem. I think when I say, this question of there's just no room for it for her to be such the book lover that she is, really what I'm saying is you are trying to give her so much, so many qualities, so many experiences, so many things that she's done, and yet, having all these things, you're going to choose certain things that are constantly coming to the top, which in reality, if you had someone that had done all those things, those are not the things that would come to the top. Her obsession with books would not be the thing that came to the top if she was a world-renowned assassin. And so I think that goes back to your whole point of she is trying to have her be everything. And that's, you also said it wasn't just her. You feel like this was true of many of the characters where there's supposedly these, they embody these various characteristics, whether it's the evilness or whatever. And so I hope in the coming books that gets played out a little more so. And so I don't know, I'm really hoping her origins as an assassin definitely gets better discussed because it's just not there. She references like being trained once. I'm like, okay, you were a world-renowned assassin. I'd like to think you had lots of training and you could tell me what that training was, or at least give me some details. So stuff like that. Or again, an assassin, she killed people. Who did she kill? Like what? She only makes like one reference to it, and she's like, well, I think she meets like two nobles, and she said, well, I chose not to kill from that time, as if she was like some assassin with a conscience. And you're just like, there's a little bit of incongruity here that you need to address in terms of, just how much this person could have actually done. And that's something that I'm really hoping is better approached, better addressed in the coming books. Maybe that's what happens in book 4 or whatever your wife said, book 3.5.
Well, I think that's the prequel. We'll have to discuss the order we're going to read them all in, but if we continue, but yeah, I do assume that there is more backstory given and that there's more depth to these characters given. It's just I feel like it's missed opportunity in this book. But again, I think you're trying to keep it tidy, but what is there I don't think does enough, and it kind of conflicts with itself. And so I think there could have been more nuance given to the plot and to the characters.
Okay. Well, I think our efforts at 2-to-1 balance has probably been slightly tampered with at this point. If we keep reiterating or providing more evidences for our criticisms and not so much for our positive comments. But let's move on because we've had a lot to say about a book that, I enjoyed reading it. I wouldn't say it would make my top 10 list of the year, but I certainly am looking forward to more books in the series, hoping to see, a continuation of the things that I liked in this book, but also hoping to see some improvements. Like I said, even within this book, I thought I saw the quality of dialogue improve by the end. I thought I saw the way she engaged with some of the tropes got better and just a little more believable by the end. I still have my biggest criticism, and I do hope that I see that better addressed in subsequent books. But we will find out. We'll see. We'll give it a couple books and see if we want to keep going. I certainly want to move on to the next one to see what I think. I don't know about you. How are you feeling, Trevor?
Dude, I gotta say, because I've been talking, to my wife as I read this, and she's. I told you, these first few were not her favorites. She kind of whatever, went through them, and she's like, "I think you're liking this more than I did." So I'm having fun with it, diving into a book at this level and preparing to come and have this conversation. I think is a lot of fun, and I am excited to get in there, even if maybe it gets worse before it gets better. But diving into this and getting the payout, because I've read books before where it's a grind, but then you get to the end and there's a payout, and it's really worth it. So I'm excited to keep doing this and diving in and see where the book goes.
Okay. Well, let's end as usual with my two main things that I always talk about, and that is who this book is for and who it is not for. So, Trevor, who is this book for?
I would say. You'd say YA. It's hard to know what that means anymore because I would say older teenagers would probably of that YA section
I would say notably, this should be said, there are no steamy scenes in this book. I think
Right.
that is a common feature that can make it hard to say who books are for. There are no steamy scenes, so in terms of feeling, okay recommending it to YA, I have no problem with that. The fact that there's no R-rated content that I would have to censor out for a kid, I think that this is perfectly fine to dub it YA.
Yeah, and I think you could have thrown this in the things we like. I think that for who her target audience is, these teenage girls who like fantasy that want to get into that and explore fantasy. It's probably a great way to get started into fantasy, introduced into it, and enroll with it. And I think she accomplishes what she sets out to do for that audience. And so I think she does well with that.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I think that is pretty obvious who the target audience is, and I do think that by and large this is a good book to recommend, especially if you think you want a big series. My follow up to that is, who is this book not for?
Are you asking me? It's not for us. I mean, but having said that, I think we're having fun with it nonetheless, and I think the series will become more and more, have more and more appeal to us as we go. But this first one, yeah, definitely not for us, and probably not for anyone who's not really interested in fantasy as a whole. I don't think if you're not interested in fantasy, I don't think this is the book that's gonna like change your mind on that.
Hmm. I agree. I think that this is, like we've said, it's geared towards young adults. I would also say, if you have experience with fantasy and this genre of fantasy already, then you may not like this one as much. If you are, I mean, even if you're here for the tropes, I think you may come with this and feel, oh, they could have been done a little better, or I think you could probably recognize that this is an early work for her and there's definitely some progression going on. So if you are well established in fantasy as well, even if you like this romantasy, I think you may not love this as much. There might be reasons why, you might early on see why it was a moment of development and growth for her. At least that's what I think.
But
Then again,
we're only talking about this book specifically, not this.
yes, for sure. We don't know the rest of the series yet, so we'll see by the end of it, and well, if we make it that far. But so yeah, I would concur with you on who this book is for and who it is not for. Trevor, is there any place anywhere else you'd like to let the viewers see any of your other work, or any complaints? Do you have an email that they can send them to if you don't like this video?
Yeah, it's Spencer reads everything. No, send all your complaints there. No, just I would say come back and continue watching these as we continue to try to push this out. We want to continue with this series as well as other series in the genre. It's a kind of fun way for us to, I think, experience this genre and be in it and try to appreciate what it does have to give. And so it's been a lot of fun doing it. And so I hope that we can keep going with it.
Yeah, I concur. But I would love to hear what everyone else has to say. Please let us know in the comments your thoughts on this series in particular, or what we hope to be a recurring element of this Bromantasy. Or if you have some other suggestions, if we don't make it through the rest of this series in particular, and we think we should maybe explore a different either book or series. I don't know. I will take any suggestions in the comments. Please let us know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.